So I was looking around one of the stock image sites that I use. It's actually istockphoto.com, and they have much more than photographs on their site. They actually provide a number of different types of graphic art and 3D images and things like that. And I noticed that there was a lot of different types of 3D arrows. It seems to be a popular thing. They have different, zigzag arrows, but they're all in a 3D environment. It looks very, very cool. And I was thinking that you could create something very similar to that right here inside Photoshop now with the new Repoussé feature in Photoshop CS5 Extended. And that's what we're going to do in this lesson now. So here in this file, you can see I got a background element, which is simply a blue and white grid that you see right here. And then above that, I've got a simple color-filled layer with this yellow color. Now the shape we're going to use to create our 3D element is this vector arrow I've drawn right here. So it's just a zigzag arrow, and it's a path. So with the path selected and on that layer that's containing the full color fill, we're going to go to 3D, Repoussé, selected path. And it's going to go ahead and apply an extrusion to this. But again, the default extrusion is a bit extreme, especially in this case. As I turn it, you can see that extrusion, that's a bit much. So I'm going to go in here into the extrude setting. In the depth setting, I'm going to change it to 0.05. And you can see it makes it a little bit thinner. In fact, we could probably make it a little bit thicker than that. We'll have to go with 0.07. That looks good. Now, you'll notice the sides are gray, whereas the front is yellow, because it didn't pick up the color and applied it to the sides. And we'll take care of that in just a moment. But before I OK out of here, I'm going to go ahead into the bevel section of my Repoussé panel and just give this arrow a very tiny bevel. Let's set the height to 1 and the width to 1 as well. Here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and click the home position, because whatever position your 3D object is in, when you click OK inside Repoussé, that will be the home position. So when you click this home button up here in the options bar, that is the position it will always default back to. So you want to make sure you go back to its original position here. You don't have to, but it's a good idea to. So go ahead and click OK. We're back inside of our panel, or back inside Photoshop. And there is our 3D layer. Now remember, those sides I mentioned are gray, so if we just rotate the object a little bit here, there's the gray sides. You simply go into your layers panel, and right here where you see layer 1 extrusion material, you simply double click on that and it opens it up as a separate document. And all you need to do is fill this document with that same color. I'm just going to press Option Delete since that color is still set in my foreground swatch. Close it and save the changes, and there the arrow is updated. So let's go ahead and put that back in the home position. And now we're going to take that grid layer behind it and go ahead and make that a 3D postcard. So we'll go under 3D, New 3D Postcard from Layer. So the difference is, instead of Repoussé, which actually applies an extrusion, the 3D postcard is just a simple flat 3D layer. There you can see right there. So now what I want to do is actually merge these two 3D objects together. We've got two 3D layers. I'm going to go ahead and select them both. Go under 3D and go down here to Merge 3D Layers. And it's going to go ahead and merge those two. And typical to what happens when you merge 3D layers is that sometimes items jump around or end up hiding behind another 3D object. In this case, if you just take the Rotate tool from the toolbar and rotate this around, you can see there's the arrow behind it. So now we got to bring that forward. So go back into the original position here. We're going to go and open up the 3D panel. And inside here, we're going to go over to the Mesh section. Right inside here, oh, and it's trying to load Mini Bridge. It's taking a minute. There it goes. So we'll go into the Mesh section, which is the second icon over, and we're going to select on the background copy, which is that grid. And we'll grab inside of the tools here the 3D Mesh Slide tool. Now this is different from the tools over here in the toolbar, whereas these tools rotate the overall object, and these will rotate individual meshes. In this case, we want to modify the background element. So we'll grab that Mesh Slide tool, click and drag up, and that pushes it back in space. And then you'll see the arrow appear just like that. So now if we turn off that background layer and rotate the overall object, you can see the arrow is now sitting above it. Very nice. Okay, now what we need to do is scale these objects a little bit. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and scale the arrow down just a little bit, as well as scale the background. And notice I'm not selecting them in here in the the 3D panel, whereas you can just hover your mouse over and highlight specific meshes. In this case, the background, I'm just going to scale it up. Pretty big, not too big. And the reason why I want to go pretty big with that is when I rotate it in 3D space here, it tilts it and is going to make the background a little bit more visible, probably more than you want it to be. So this is going to take some, and again, I've told a lot of people that working with 3D, especially if you're brand new to it, is going to take some practice, especially moving objects around in 3D space. Notice I'm just using the rotate and roll tools to just maneuver this object into position, sliding it around. I'm going to slide it forward a little bit so we're seeing more of that background. There we go. And we'll just nudge that up a little bit. So much fun. Now, let's assume we've got it in position where we like it to be. Now what I want to do is add some lights because it's too flat right now. That's because there are no lights at all. If you go over to the light section, there's no lights assigned. We're going to go ahead and add a new spotlight to this scenario. You can see the light has shown up, but we need to see it a little better. So we're actually going to turn on the 3D light wireframe. And now we can see the light. I see the light. So now let's go ahead and rotate this around. And again, like the other tools, when you're manipulating a 3D object, you can manipulate the light by sliding it towards you, sliding it up in space. And again, like the 3D object rotate tools, the object tools, the light tools do take some time to get used to. Notice it's a little bit of a narrow scope of the light, so I'm going to go into the fall off section here and actually change this to 75 to widen the scope of the light. There it is. And that looks pretty good. Now, if I rotate this around, I can probably see that I have a little bit of distance in there, and that looks pretty good. You do want to have a little bit of distance between your object and its background. And that's because of the shadow and reflection we're going to assign it here. So I'm going to go and turn off that light wireframe for the moment. And we're going to now add the reflection and shadow properties. Now, recap what we've got so far. We've taken those two layers, merged them together, and simply manipulated them and maneuvered them into the position they are in now, and then added our spotlight. So the 3D object is in position and the light is in position. Now we're going to go into the materials section here. And we want to select the background copy, which is this background grid. And then go down here and change the reflection setting to about 25. Now we don't see an obvious change because we haven't rendered it yet. But before we do that, I'm going to jump over to the lights section one more time. And down here where it says create shadows, leave that checked on, but I'm going to set the softness to about 10. So it's not a really, really harsh shadow when we go and apply it. So all those settings are in place. Let's go ahead and have a look at what we've got. We'll go over to the scene section, which is the first icon here. Go down to the quality menu here and choose Ray Trace Draft. And that's going to do a quick progressive render. And it's going to show us what we've got. So you can see it's rendering the shadows. And we can see the reflection in the surface here. And this is making a huge difference. From before, it was just a 3D arrow sitting on top of a background. It didn't look very dimensional, though it was in 3D. But now by adding the reflection and shadow properties, we're getting a much more realistic scenario in creating that 3D arrow on a cool background. So not necessarily, it isn't really necessary to go and get stock images of arrows anymore. If you have the time, you can create your own custom 3D arrows right here inside Photoshop.